Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Anne and today I'm going to talk about all of the books I read in August, most of which were for the NEWTs Readathon. So, in August I read 10 books, which is an absolute record for me. This means I've now read 46 books in total this year, even though Goodreads says 45, because one of the books I have read this month doesn't have an ISBN number, so it isn't on Goodreads. And 7 of those 10 books I read was for the NEWTs Readathon, which is part of the Magical Readathon, and it ran for the entirety of August. And if you want to know more about that readathon, you can watch my TBR, which I'll link up above, and in that video I explain everything about the readathon. Those 7 books I read were for the requirements of the librarian career within the Magical Readathon, and 2 of the 3 other books I read this month I later ended up fitting into 2 other prompts for the readathon as well, even though initially I didn't mean to read them for the readathon. I don't know if that all made sense to you, but so be it. Let's just get into the 10 books, because I think this is going to be quite a long video. The first book I read in August was Welkom in het Rijk der Zieken by Hannah Barefoots, which I read for an acceptable in ancient runes for the prompt read a book recommended to you by a friend. And as you might have noticed from the gibberish, this is a Dutch book, and the title, Welkom in het Rijk der Zieken, translates to Welcome to the Realm of the Ill. It's a book about a man named Clay who has become chronically ill after getting Q fever, and the story is about him and his struggle with his illness and coming to terms with the fact that he is now probably ill for life. And it also deals with the way he becomes isolated from his friends and the people he cares about. And the author of this book, Hannah Barefoots, is chronically ill herself as well, so this is an own voices book, even though she does have a different illness. But that really shone through, because this is a very raw and real book, even though it does deal with things like a parallel universe, which is of course not very real, but it felt very real because of the way it was written. And this parallel universe seems to be a metaphor for his illness and his new life as a chronically ill man, but it is never fully explained, which I actually really appreciated. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars, because while I do think it's a very important book and I really did enjoy it and I was moved by it, I didn't always fully connect to it, and I think that mostly has to do with the fact that it is written in Dutch and I don't really read that much Dutch anymore. I read mostly English books, and I think this is the first Dutch book I read in 2 years, or maybe I read one last year as well, I don't really remember. But I don't really read more than 1 Dutch book a year. Not as a rule, but just because Dutch books don't really appeal to me. I tend to like them less than English books, and I think that mostly has to do with the language. English just conveys things very differently than Dutch. But still, I really do think this is a very good book, and if you're a Dutch person, I definitely recommend reading this. The next book I finished in August is Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia, and I listened to this on audiobook, and this is the only book that doesn't count for anything within the NEWTs Readathon, because I started reading it in July. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I think I want to buy my own physical copy because this has definite reread potential. The story is about Eliza Merck, who is shy and socially awkward and anxious a lot, but she is also the creator of one of the most famous webcomics on the internet that has millions of followers and also earns her enough money that she doesn't have to worry about paying for college. And the story basically starts when there's a new guy in Eliza's school called Wallace, and Eliza befriends him. And this is kind of special for Eliza because she doesn't have any friends at her school, she only has online friends. But then she also finds out that Wallace is the creator of the most popular fanfiction of Eliza's webcomic. And that complicates things because Eliza doesn't want to tell Wallace who she is, because nobody at her school knows that she is the creator of Monstrous Sea, her webcomic. And of course this eventually leads to drama. And I really like this story, really love this story actually, because of the way it deals with... Okay, there's a helicopter flying over, so that makes a lot of noise. I live right next to the hospital, so once in a while there's a trauma helicopter flying over. Which is not something I can use right now, but I hope the person in it is okay, or will be okay. Okay, I'm just gonna continue because I don't have all day. So why I love this story is that because of the way it deals with being shy and having anxiety and having social anxiety, while also being creative and having an entire life on the internet and feeling fulfilled because of that. Eliza is very successful. It's just in a way that not a lot of people, including her parents, understand. And I really like the exploration of this because it is a pretty new phenomenon, and it does create a gap between people who grew up without this internet and the life you can have on the internet and people who grew up with it. And I kind of recognized myself in some of Eliza's struggles, just a little less extreme. The third book I finished in August is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling, the illustrated edition. I read this for an acceptable in history of magic for the prompt read a fantasy book, and this was of course the perfect book to read for the magical readathon, which is based on Harry Potter. And of course this book just needs no further explanation. I gave it 5 stars, of course, and I loved getting back in the Harry Potter universe and getting back into the first book, because I always forget just how much I love the first book, Harry's awe at the magic and the magic world and everything that's going on, and his love for Hogwarts. We have that in common with him at that point. Of course, as a reread, I know all of that stuff, but experiencing it all again just always has this very special thing about it, and I really love that feeling. And I also almost cried when Hagrid gave Harry the photo album of his parents at the end. I just love Hagrid so much. It was such a sweet moment. But yeah, this was great, obviously. Book number 4 is Holding by Graham Norton, which I read for an Exceeds Expectations in Ancient Runes for the prompt read a book that's written in the past tense. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars because it was enjoyable, but it definitely wasn't great. The story is about a small town community where a body is found, and then secrets and grudges and romances from the past are unearthed and come up again, and everybody has to deal with that while also finding out who the body belongs to and what happened there. I have a certain weakness for small town stories, so I definitely did enjoy this, but there were some things that kind of bothered me, and the first one of those things was the writing style. Graham Norton knows how to write, and I did love or like some of the writing in here, but there were also a lot of times where there were just a few too many adjectives, and that kind of took me out the story. I thought, why do you have to describe this object that isn't important to the story with 2 or 3 adjectives? I don't know, it might be a minor thing, but when that happens a lot, it just really takes me out of the story. And then there was the fact that I guessed the 2 big plot twists as well, so the mystery wasn't really that much of a mystery for me. And then also the third thing I didn't like is the fact that there is kind of a lot of fat shaming going on in this book. One of the main characters is the policeman or the guard, PJ, and he is really big. He's really fat, and we know that, and we know his thoughts about it and his backstory behind why he's grown so big. But we also get to know over and over and over again what the people in the town think of him. They seem to despise him or look down on him just because he is so big, and that became really annoying. So yeah, I bought this book because I love Graham Norton, but I think I'm just going to stick to his talk show and not read more of his books after this. Next up we've got Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, and I read this for an outstanding in Ancient Runes for a book that has been on your TBR for ages. That took some thinking, but yeah, that's it. I'm so glad I finally read this. It was everything its reputation made it out to be, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This is the best graphic novel I've ever read. It is magnificently structured, and every little detail is important and comes back again in a way that is quite unexpected a lot of the times. It is about these superheroes, or masked vigilantes as they are called in this book, who used to be active, but then they retired about 10 years before the story starts, because there was a new law that outlawed the things they did. Which is basically superhero stuff, saving people, stuff like that. But they are forced back into this life, or at least forced into communicating with each other and catching up with each other, because one of them is killed. What I loved most about this book is that it isn't as black and white as most of the other superhero stories, and there are a lot of them by now. This is from 1985, I think, so it's pretty old, but it holds up. It's really, really good. But Watchmen exists in this grey area. It explores morality through these main characters who aren't fully good or fully bad. None of them do the masked vigilante stuff just because they want to help people and want to do good. Some of them do it for the fame, some of them do it for the thrill, and some of them do it because it makes them feel good. It's an interesting look at morality, and it's just a really good book altogether. I would definitely recommend this if you're into graphic novels. Then there's I'll Be There For You, the one about friends by Kelsey Miller, which I read for Defense Against the Dark Arts for an acceptable for the prompt. Read a book that's black under the dust jacket, and let's see, this is definitely black under the dust jacket. Like the title already says, this is a non-fiction book about friends, which has been my favorite TV show for years and years, but recently, over the past couple of years, I've grown a little more critical of it and have loved it a little less, because it hasn't aged that well in terms of sexism, homophobia, fat shaming, trans discrimination, racism, all of those things. But reading this book made me realize that Friends is a product of its time. It's from the 90s, and things were very different in the 90s when it comes to social awareness and racism, sexism, homophobia, stuff like that. There just wasn't that much diversity on TV, and Friends was a part of that because it existed in that time. And I get why people wouldn't really like it now when they see it for the first time, because it has aged. That's definitely true, but I don't think we can blame Friends for the fact that it existed in the time it existed, and for sometimes being quite insensitive, because that's definitely true. Friends does have some problematic elements, but I get why. Does that make sense? I think it does. Anyway, that's a little detour. I'm grateful to this book for making me aware of that, and I also just really liked reading about the history of Friends, of how it was conceived, of how everything came together, including the actors, and just what influence it had at the time and how everything happened. Because I know Friends was really popular and I know a lot of people love it, but I didn't know just the cultural impact it really did have. So yeah, that was really interesting and I enjoyed it a lot, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I don't remember if I said that already. The next book I read was Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo, which I read for an Exceeds Expectations in History of Magic, for a book that includes a map. This is the second book in the Grisha trilogy, and I read the first book, Shadow and Bone, in July, and I definitely enjoyed that one more than I did this one. I gave Shadow and Bone 4.5 stars, and I ended up giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars. I still enjoyed it, but it wasn't as good or as exciting as the first book. It just felt mostly like preparation for the last book and the big climax, and there just was a lot of waiting involved, and I still enjoyed a lot of the things that did happen, but yeah, there were more things I wasn't that happy about. For example, I'm still not sure what I think of Alina's development. I like her new power and I like how she struggles with that power and the problems that brings with it, but I'm not so sure how I like the fact that she's suddenly this fearless leader and how she basically grew up very quickly, I guess. It seems like a very big jump from how she was the first book. And I also finally understand why so many people don't like or even hate Mel. I totally get it. I don't like him now either. I do love Nikolai though, I really enjoyed him as a character, and I still adore the world this book is set in. So I'm quite excited to read the third and final book, but I'm not sure when I'll get to it. The last book I read for the requirements of the librarian career is Heartstopper Volume 2 by Alice Oseman, which I read for Exceeds Expectations in Defense Against the Dark Arts. And the prompt for that was read the first book that you think of, and that was this one, among others. This is a graphic novel about two high school boys who fall in love with each other, and it's just really wonderful and sweet and cute, and I love it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I really love the art style as well, not just the way the book or the story is drawn, but also the things Alice Oseman decides to show in her drawings. It really adds to the story and the emotion and the atmosphere. So those were all the books I read for the librarian career, but I read 2 more books and then I fitted them to the 2 prompts they fit with, if that makes sense, like I explained earlier. And the first one of those was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, which I listened to on audiobook, and that worked for an acceptable in herbology, which was to read an audiobook. I debated my rating for this for a little while, but then I just decided to go with my gut and I gave it 5 stars. I kind of want to reread it immediately. I was really in the mood for an adult contemporary romance or rom-com, and this fits that just absolutely perfect. It's the story about Olive, who is very unlucky in life, unlike her twin sister Amy, who has all the luck in the world, it seems. But then the tables kind of turn when it's Amy's wedding. She gets married to Dane, but during the wedding reception everyone gets food poisoning except for Olive and Dane's brother Ethan. And so Amy asks Olive to go on her honeymoon for her because it's non-refundable. And the only downside to that is that Ethan comes as well, and they have to pretend that they are married. And of course everyone can see what happens next. This was such a great story. It's really funny, it's sweet, and it's sexy at times, and I really loved it a lot. And I kind of want to buy the physical book because I can see myself rereading this. And if you're looking for a fun rom-com, I can definitely recommend this. And then the 10th and last book I read in August was Memento by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. And this is the book that isn't on Goodreads because it doesn't have an ISBN number, because it was created as promotional material for Aurora Rising, which is the new book by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I didn't like that one. If you want to know why, you can watch my review. I'll leave it up above. You can't just buy this one in stores. It, like I said, it came as promotional material with another book. But my friend Inge knew I wanted to read it a lot, and she was kind enough to send her copy to me, and I'm going to send it back as soon as I'm done with this wrap up. So if you're watching this, Inge, thanks so much again. You're amazing. I'm so glad I finally read it. So this is a novella that is a prequel to the Illuminate trilogy, also by these authors, of course, and it gives us some backstory on the things that happened during the Illuminate trilogy. I really liked it because of that backstory, but I didn't really like that suddenly Aiden, who is the AI, gets this narrative voice, which kind of defeats the entire format it is told in. So yeah, that was a bit of a bummer, but I like the story, and I'm glad I've read it. I think I'd give this 3.5 out of 5 stars. And that's it. I got through all of the 10 books. I think this is going to be a really long video because I've been filming for quite some time now. But I'm really proud of myself for reading all of these books this month, and I'm also really happy that I liked so many of them. I gave quite a few of them 4+ stars, so that's good. So thanks for watching. Please let me know down below if you participated in the NEWTs Readathon and what your favorite book was you read this month. Please like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more of me. And I'm also on social media. You can find the links to my blog and my Twitter and my Goodreads and my Instagram down below in the description box. And I'll see you in the next one. Have a wonderful day. Bye!